Emma Carter was not the kind of person who stood out in a crowd. She was quiet, calm, and always seemed lost in her own thoughts. When she joined the private security firm in Virginia, nobody paid much attention to her. Most of the employees were tough-looking men with military backgrounds, broad shoulders, loud laughs, and stories about combat missions. Emma, on the other hand, was small-built, polite, and almost too gentle for the job. When she walked into the training room on her first day, wearing simple black clothes and carrying a small bag, the other recruits exchanged amused looks. They thought she was in the wrong place. One man even joked, "Miss, HR is down the hall," thinking she was there for an office position. Emma just smiled politely and said, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Her calmness seemed strange to them. Usually, new recruits tried to prove themselves, talking loudly, showing off their skills, but Emma said very little. She sat quietly in the corner, watching everyone with sharp, observant eyes. The firm, called Ironsight Security, specialized in high-risk protection jobs. Many of its members were former soldiers or police officers. They prided themselves on being the best in the business. So, when Emma's name appeared on the new recruit list, everyone assumed it was a mistake or a favor. Some said she must have had connections inside the company. Others guessed she was there to fill a diversity quota. Whatever the reason, they didn't believe she could handle real training. On the second day, physical training began. The recruits gathered in the open field early in the morning. The sun was hot, and the air smelled of dust and sweat. The trainer, a rough-looking man named Sergeant Miller, barked orders like a drill instructor. Push-ups, sit-ups, run. The men grunted and laughed as they worked. Emma followed quietly, her movements smooth and controlled. She didn't complain or slow down, but nobody seemed to notice. During breaks, the others made jokes about her. "Bet she's never even held a gun," one said. "She'll probably faint when she sees blood," another laughed. Emma heard every word but kept her eyes on the ground, breathing slowly. There was no anger in her face, no embarrassment, just focus. That attitude made a few of them uncomfortable. They expected her to snap or walk away. But she didn't. She just kept showing up every single day, working harder than anyone else. One afternoon, Miller asked everyone to run 5 miles carrying heavy backpacks. It was a brutal task even for the strongest recruits. Emma didn't complain once. She tied her hair back, adjusted the straps, and started running. Halfway through, some men began slowing down. Emma passed them silently, her steps steady and her breathing calm. When she reached the finish line, she didn't boast or celebrate. She just stood quietly, waiting for the others to arrive. That small moment caught Miller's eye. He noticed something different in the way she moved. There was no wasted motion, no panic, just control. It was the kind of discipline that only came from experience, not from gym training. But Miller didn't say anything yet. He just watched. Later that day, while the recruits rested, one of the men approached her. "Hey, where'd you learn to run like that?" "Yoga class," he teased. Emma looked up, smiled faintly, and replied, "Some lessons stay with you, no matter where you go." The man frowned, confused, but before he could ask more, she walked away. As the days passed, Emma's quietness began to bother the team. They couldn't figure her out. Most people talked about their pasts, where they served, what missions they'd been on, but Emma never shared anything. She didn't brag, didn't complain, didn't try to make friends. She simply trained, followed orders, and left when the day was done. In the locker room, whispers started spreading. "Maybe she's ex-military," someone said. "Nah. Look at her hands, too soft." Another one added, "She's probably never even been outside the country." They laughed, making up wild stories about her. But deep down, a few of them were curious. There was something in her eyes that didn't fit her calm exterior. Something sharp and distant, like she had seen things others hadn't. One evening, as the sun was setting and most of the recruits were packing up, Miller stopped her. "Carter," he said, "you ever served before?" She hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. "Not officially," she replied. The way she said it, soft yet firm, made him pause. He nodded slowly and said, You move like someone who's been trained." Emma simply smiled and walked away, leaving the question hanging in the air. By the end of the first week, the others had made up their minds about her. They thought she didn't belong. She wasn't loud or aggressive like the rest of them, and in their world, quiet people were seen as weak. But Emma didn't care about their opinions. Every morning, she arrived before everyone else, ran alone, practiced her drills, and left after everyone was gone. She knew what they thought of her, but she also knew the truth. Years ago, she had done things she could never talk about. Missions that didn't exist on paper. People she had saved and others she had lost. Her calmness wasn't weakness. It was control. And while everyone else was busy laughing at her, she was quietly preparing for the moment when they would finally see who she really was. They didn't know it yet, but the woman they dismissed as fragile once carried secrets that could silence an entire room. And soon that moment was coming. Days passed and the jokes about Emma Carter only grew louder. By now, the other recruits at Ironsight Security had made her the center of their mockery. Whenever she entered the room, whispers started, and grins spread across faces. They didn't see her as a teammate. They saw her as a joke. A woman in a world built for men. A desk girl, who somehow slipped into their elite training program. Emma noticed everything, but she never said a word. She trained quietly, kept her focus, and walked away whenever the teasing began. To the others, her silence made her an easy target. They mistook her calm for fear. During one morning drill, Sergeant Miller instructed the recruits to practice basic self-defense moves. The men paired up quickly, choosing partners they could easily overpower. When Emma looked around, no one wanted to work with her. A tall recruit named Ryan laughed and said, "Come on, guys. Someone help the lady before she trips." No one moved. Finally, Miller assigned Ryan himself to partner with her. He rolled his eyes and stepped forward like it was a punishment. "Don't worry," Ryan said with a smirk. "I'll go easy on you." Emma just nodded, tying her hair back. They began the exercise, a simple takedown drill. Ryan lunged toward her with too much force, trying to show off. To his surprise, Emma moved aside effortlessly, using his own momentum to make him stumble. It wasn't a complete throw, but enough to catch everyone's attention. Ryan laughed it off, but his pride was bruised. The others laughed, too, at him this time, and that made him angry. "Lucky move," he muttered. "You won't do that again." For the rest of the session, Ryan tried harder to embarrass her. He pushed, blocked, and grabbed roughly, far beyond what the exercise required. Emma didn't fight back. She stayed calm, followed the moves, and refused to lose her temper. By the end of the session, she was sweating and tired but still standing. Ryan, however, looked frustrated and irritated. When the drill ended, he shoved his gloves off and muttered, "She doesn't belong here." The others laughed again, not realizing that the woman they mocked had spent years controlling her emotions in far more dangerous places. Emma knew how to handle people like Ryan, men who mistook aggression for strength. She had met hundreds like him during her time in covert operations. The only difference now was that she had no need to prove anything. Later that afternoon, the team gathered for endurance training. It was brutal, climbing, crawling, lifting, and running in full gear. The sun burned hot, and dust filled the air. One by one, recruits began slowing down. Emma kept moving steadily, her pace consistent. Sweat dripped down her face, but her breathing stayed even. When she reached the finish line again before several of the men, the laughter started anew. "Look at her," someone called out, "trying to be the hero." Another said, "Maybe she's got something to prove." But Emma didn't even look at them. She simply went to the water station, drank slowly, and looked out at the horizon. That calm expression of hers started to bother people more than the training itself. Her silence made them uncomfortable, like she knew something they didn't. Ryan especially couldn't stand it. He wanted her to react, to shout back, to show weakness. But she never gave him that satisfaction. That evening, in the locker room, the gossip continued. "She's weird," one recruit said. "Doesn't talk to anyone." Another added, "Maybe she's scared to tell us she's never fired a weapon before." They laughed, their voices echoing off the metal walls. Emma sat quietly on a bench nearby, tying her boots, pretending not to hear. Inside, she felt a mixture of sadness and patience. She wasn't angry. She understood why they acted this way. People feared what they couldn't understand. What they didn't know was that Emma had already faced real fear, the kind that came with late-night missions, hidden targets, and silence before chaos. Compared to that, their mockery was nothing more than background noise. One night, after everyone had gone, Sergeant Miller found Emma alone on the training field. She was running drills in the dark, repeating the same movement over and over, her step steady, her focus absolute. The moonlight reflected off her sweat. Miller watched for a moment before walking up. "You don't have to prove anything, Carter," he said. "They'll keep talking no matter what." Emma stopped, breathing heavily, and looked at him. "I'm not proving anything, sir," she replied softly. "I'm just keeping myself ready." Her tone caught him off guard. There was a weight behind her words, a quiet kind of power. Miller didn't say anything more, but as he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. The next day, the teasing continued, but some of the recruits began to notice small things. How she always knew exactly how to position her body during drills. How her reaction time was faster than anyone else's. How she never panicked, even when the tasks became dangerous. Still, they brushed it off, convincing themselves she was just lucky. During lunch, Ryan threw a crumpled napkin at her from across the table. "Hey, soldier girl," he mocked. "You gonna teach us your secret yoga moves?" The table erupted in laughter. Emma didn't even look up. She just said quietly, "You wouldn't last 5 minutes in my old job." Her voice was calm, but the tone made Ryan pause. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. He frowned, but before he could reply, Miller walked in, calling everyone back to training. As the team got up, Ryan leaned toward another recruit and whispered, "I'm gonna find out what she's hiding." That was the moment the mockery began to shift into curiosity. They still laughed at her, but deep down, something about Emma Carter didn't fit the picture they had painted. She wasn't scared. She wasn't weak. She was just waiting. And while they wasted their breath trying to break her spirit, Emma was quietly studying every one of them. How they moved, how they thought, how they reacted under stress. She was used to blending in, to hiding in plain sight. The teasing didn't hurt her. It only reminded her how easy it was to be underestimated. Because someday soon, the same people who laughed at her would witness something they would never forget, and none of them would ever dare to laugh again. The day started like any other at Ironsight Security. The sun had barely risen when the recruits gathered for another round of physical training. Dust filled the air as boots hit the ground, and the sound of Miller's whistle echoed across the open field. Everyone was tired, sweaty, and irritated. The week had been long, and the competition between the recruits had grown intense, especially between Ryan and Emma. Ryan still hadn't let go of the embarrassment from the previous sessions. Every time he looked at Emma, his pride burned. He couldn't accept that she had outperformed him in front of everyone. In his mind, he had to prove that she didn't belong there. So, when Miller announced a surprise obstacle course challenge, Ryan's lips curled into a smirk. "Finally," he muttered to the others. "Let's see how the princess handles this." The obstacle course was brutal. A series of walls, ropes, tunnels, and water pits spread across a long field. It tested not just strength but endurance, balance, and focus. The recruits lined up at the starting point, panting in the morning heat. Miller explained the rules. Everyone had to complete the course while carrying a 20-pound pack. "Speed matters," he shouted, "but precision matters more. One mistake, and you're out." When the whistle blew, chaos began. The men sprinted forward, shouting and pushing to get ahead. Emma started slower, pacing herself, watching every move. She didn't rush. Her steps were calculated, her breathing steady. The first wall came up, a tall wooden structure slick with morning dew. Most recruits struggled to pull themselves over, grunting and shouting as they tried to climb. Emma moved quietly, gripping the sides, finding her footing, and pulling herself over with ease. By the halfway point, A few recruits were already exhausted. Some slipped in the mud pits, others got tangled in the ropes. Emma's clothes were soaked, but she kept her rhythm. She didn't stop to look around or compete. She just moved, one obstacle at a time, her eyes focused straight ahead. Her calm determination started to catch attention. Even Miller, who was monitoring from the side, couldn't help but notice her form. There was precision in every move, like she had done this 100 times before. As Emma neared the final stretch, Ryan, who was just a few steps behind, decided to make his move. His anger had been building all morning. Seeing her ahead of him was too much. As they both climbed the last cargo net, he reached out and gave her a small shove from behind. It wasn't strong enough to injure, but enough to throw her off balance. Emma slipped, landing hard on her shoulder before rolling onto the ground. The impact scraped her arm, blood streaking down, but she didn't cry out. The other recruits stopped for a moment, some gasping, others pretending not to notice. Ryan climbed down, pretending it was an accident. "Didn't see you there," he said with a smirk. Emma looked up at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't shout or accuse him. She just stood up slowly, dusted herself off, and continued running toward the finish line. The silence that followed was heavy. Even Miller's whistle paused for a few seconds as he watched her. When Emma crossed the finish line, she didn't celebrate or complain about her injury. She simply placed her pack on the ground and stood quietly. Ryan arrived moments later, breathing hard and looking unsure. The rest of the recruits followed, some whispering to each other about what they had just seen. Miller walked over to Emma, his eyes narrowing. "You okay, Carter?" he asked. She nodded, pressing a cloth against her bleeding arm. "I'm fine, sir," she said. "It's just a scratch." Her voice was calm, almost emotionless. Miller studied her for a moment. The way she stood, steady, alert, unshaken, reminded him of something. It wasn't the stance of a beginner. It was the posture of someone trained for control under pressure. Later, in the break room, a few recruits tried to joke about what happened. "She fell pretty hard," one said. "Guess she's not invincible after all." But their laughter didn't sound as confident as before. Something about the way Emma had handled herself unsettled them. She hadn't reacted like a normal person would. No anger, no frustration, just calm. Ryan sat in the corner, pretending to relax, but he couldn't shake the image of her face when he pushed her. There was no fear there. In fact, for a brief moment he thought he saw something in her eyes. Something sharp, dangerous, almost predatory. It was like she knew exactly what he'd done and had already decided not to waste energy on it. That realization made him uneasy. That evening, as the recruits packed up, Miller called Emma to stay behind. "You handled yourself well today," he said. "That fall should have rattled you, but it didn't." Emma simply replied, "I've been trained to stay calm, sir." "Trained?" Miller repeated. "Where?" Emma smiled faintly. "Different places," she said. "Long ago." Miller didn't press further, but his curiosity grew. He had spent years working with special units, and he recognized the way she spoke, the discipline in her tone, the measured control in her words. It was the same calmness he'd seen in soldiers who had survived things most people couldn't imagine. After she left, Miller stood alone on the field, thinking. Her movements, her reactions, her silence. It all reminded him of classified operations he'd heard about during his service. Units that didn't exist on paper. People who carried no ranks, no medals, only scars and memories they could never talk about. He began to wonder if Emma Carter was one of them. The rest of the team didn't know what was going through their instructor's mind. They continued their jokes, but the laughter had lost some of its edge. Deep down, even Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something dangerous hiding behind Emma's calm eyes. That obstacle course, the shove, the quiet recovery. It was the first time they saw a glimpse of who she really was. And though no one could explain why, the air around her began to change. People still laughed, but not as loud. And Miller, for the first time, started keeping a close watch on the mysterious woman who refused to break. After the obstacle course incident, something began to change around the training camp. The laughter didn't disappear completely, but it wasn't as loud as before. The recruits had seen how Emma handled herself when things went wrong, and deep down, they were beginning to wonder who she really was. No ordinary person reacted the way she did after being pushed, hurt, and humiliated. She never showed anger, fear, or frustration. It was like she had trained her emotions to stay locked behind an invisible wall. That night, as the rest of the team sat around the barracks eating dinner, whispers started again. But this time, the tone was different. One of the recruits named Harris leaned closer to Ryan and said quietly, "You know, I think I've heard her name before." Ryan frowned. "Heard where?" he asked. Harris shrugged. "Not sure. My cousin worked with some classified files when he was in the army. Said there was an Emma Carter listed in a report years ago, something about a Black Ops mission overseas." Ryan laughed. "Black Ops? You really think she was part of that? Come on, man." But Harris didn't laugh. "I'm serious. He told me the file was sealed. He said the team didn't officially exist." The others around the table looked uneasy. They'd all heard rumors about secret units, people who worked in the shadows, doing missions that governments would never admit to. But those were just stories, the kind that soldiers told in bars after too many drinks. The idea that the quiet woman training beside them might have been part of one of those units felt impossible. The next morning, Emma arrived early as always. The field was still covered in fog, and the air was cold. She stretched quietly, her movements precise and slow. Ryan walked past her, pretending not to look, but he couldn't stop glancing at the scar on her arm from the previous day. It wasn't a fresh wound anymore. It looked old, as if her body was used to healing from much worse. Later, during firearm drills, something else caught everyone's attention. The recruits were given a timed shooting test, meant to measure accuracy and reaction speed. Most struggled under pressure, missing targets or reloading too slowly. When it was Emma's turn, the entire field went silent. She picked up the weapon, checked it without hesitation, and fired 6 shots in quick succession. Every single bullet hit dead center. No one spoke for a moment. Even Sergeant Miller stared. "Perfect score," he said under his breath. Emma set the weapon down calmly and said, "May I reset the targets, sir?" Miller nodded slowly, still trying to understand what he had just seen. The rest of the recruits were stunned. Ryan tried to act unimpressed, saying, "Must have been luck." But his voice didn't sound confident. Everyone knew luck couldn't explain the precision she just displayed. Her stance, her breathing, her aim, it was all too natural, too trained. By the afternoon, the rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed she was a former agent. Others said she must have come from some secret military branch. One of the older guards at the facility even swore he recognized the way she handled weapons. "That's not beginner stuff," he told Miller privately. "That's the kind of control they teach in deep covert ops." Miller didn't respond, but inside, he knew the man was right. He'd seen soldiers like her before, people who had lived through missions that never made it to the news. He started to notice little details. The way Emma's eyes scanned her surroundings, the way she always positioned herself with her back to a wall, the way she could predict movements before they happened. Those were instincts that came from surviving real danger. That night, Miller decided to do a little digging of his own. After the recruits left, he went into the small office by the training ground and opened the personnel database. He searched Emma Carter's name. The file popped up. Basic details. Nothing special. Age, address, former employment listed as consultant. But when he scrolled down, he noticed something strange. The section labeled military background had been blacked out. Redacted. It simply said, classified access, clearance level restricted. Miller leaned back in his chair, surprised. Regular recruits didn't have restricted files. Even his own file wasn't sealed like that. That meant someone high up had intentionally hidden her history. He stared at the screen for a long time, then shut it down. He didn't know whether to be impressed or cautious. Meanwhile, the gossip among the recruits grew wilder. Some started to avoid her altogether, nervous about the idea that she might be dangerous. Others grew curious, trying to ask her casual questions about her past. Emma never gave clear answers. When one of them asked where she learned to shoot like that, she smiled slightly and said, "Practice." When another asked if she'd ever been deployed, she said softly, "Not in the way you think." Her words only deepened the mystery. Ryan, however, refused to believe the stories. His pride wouldn't allow it. He told himself it was all just coincidence, that she was skilled, maybe, but nothing more. Still, something about her calmness began to bother him. Every time he tried to mock her, she just looked at him with that same unreadable expression. It was like she could see straight through him, and that made him uncomfortable. One evening, during a night patrol exercise, the team had to move through a simulated danger zone in the dark. Most recruits stumbled, making noise, losing coordination. Emma moved like a shadow, silent, focused, aware of every sound around her. When one of the recruits tripped and fell, she was the first to react, pulling him up and signaling for silence without speaking a word. The motion was smooth, practiced. When the exercise ended, even Miller couldn't hide his admiration. "Good work, Carter," he said quietly. She nodded once. No smile, no pride, just acknowledgement. That night, when the team gathered back at the barracks, Harris whispered to the others, "I swear she's hiding something big. Maybe she really was one of them." Ryan scoffed, but he didn't argue this time. Deep down, he was starting to wonder too. By now, Emma's quiet mystery had turned into something bigger than gossip. Every move she made drew attention. Every silence carried weight. And though no one knew for sure who she really was, one thing had become clear to everyone at Ironsight. Emma Carter was not an ordinary recruit. Something about her past was buried deep, and whatever it was powerful enough to make even the toughest men uneasy. And in the days to come, that mystery would finally begin to unfold, piece by piece, until the truth about the woman with the calm eyes and hidden scars could no longer stay buried. The air in the training ground felt heavy that morning. The team at Ironsight Security had finished a long week of drills, and the tension between the recruits could almost be felt in the air. Most of it came from Ryan. His pride had been bruised again and again. First when Emma outperformed him in drills, then when she shot a perfect score in the firearm test, and finally, when rumors began spreading that she had a secret military past. Ryan couldn't take it anymore. He needed to prove once and for all that she didn't belong there. That morning, while everyone was stretching before training, he walked up to her in front of the group and said loudly, "Hey Carter, I think we're all tired of the mystery. Why don't you show us what you can really do?" Emma looked up, calm as always. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Ryan grinned. "A little challenge. Hand-to-hand combat. You and me. No excuses this time." The other recruits went silent. Some exchanged excited looks. They knew this wasn't about training, it was about pride. Miller, the instructor, looked at Ryan with annoyance. "This isn't a game, Ryan," he warned. But Ryan ignored him. "Come on, sir. Let's make it fair. A simple sparring round. I'll go easy on her." Emma stood up slowly, tightening her gloves. "If it's okay with you, sir," she said to Miller, "I'll accept." Miller hesitated. He had seen how easily Ryan lost control when angry, and something about Emma's calm made him uneasy. But Emma's tone was steady, almost reassuring. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. 1 round. No full contact. Just technique." The recruits quickly formed a circle around the mat. Ryan stood tall, cracking his knuckles, his face full of confidence. Emma stood across from him, relaxed and still. Her hands were up, but not in a defensive pose. More like she was waiting. When Miller gave the signal, Ryan lunged first. He swung fast, trying to grab her arm, but Emma moved aside effortlessly, her steps light and controlled. Ryan turned quickly and attacked again, this time faster, but she dodged every move without striking back. The crowd started murmuring. "Come on, Ryan," someone shouted. "Don't let her dance around you." Frustrated, Ryan charged again, this time with full force. Emma ducked low, sidestepped, and before anyone could blink, she twisted his wrist, used his momentum, and flipped him onto the mat. The sound of his body hitting the ground silenced the entire room. Ryan lay there stunned, blinking in disbelief. Emma didn't move to hit him again. Instead, She stepped back and said quietly, "You should always stay balanced before you strike." The recruits stared in shock. The fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Ryan sat up, his pride shattered. "You got lucky," he muttered, getting to his feet. "You won't do that again." He charged a second time, angrier and wilder. But Emma was already ready for it. She caught his arm, spun him around, and pinned him face down on the mat with one arm behind his back. This time, she held him there, her knee pressing lightly between his shoulder blades. "Enough," Miller said firmly, stepping forward. But Emma had already let go. She helped Ryan to his feet, her face calm and emotionless. "You fight with anger," she said softly. "That's dangerous. Not for your opponent, but for you." Ryan's face turned red. He wanted to shout, to argue, to accuse her of cheating, but he couldn't find the words. Everyone had seen what just happened. The same men who once laughed at her were now staring in stunned silence. Miller cleared his throat. "That's enough for today," he said, trying to sound normal, though even he looked shaken. As the recruits started to disperse, whispers began. "Did you see that?" one said. "She moved like she's done that 1,000 times. Another whispered, "That wasn't just training. That was professional." Ryan stormed out of the training hall, his pride shattered. He couldn't stop thinking about how easily she had taken him down, how calm she had been while doing it. It wasn't just skill. It was something deeper, something controlled and practiced. Meanwhile, Emma stayed behind to put away the training gear. Miller approached her quietly. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he asked. She paused for a moment before replying, "From people who don't miss twice." Her words made his stomach tighten. It was an answer that said everything and nothing at the same time. Later that day, during lunch, Ryan walked back into the dining area, his face still hard with anger. The room went quiet. He stood across from Emma's table, glaring at her. "You think you're better than everyone here?" he said loudly. Emma looked up at him, her expression calm. "No," she replied. "I just know how to fight without losing myself." The way she said it, the tone of her voice, soft but steady, made everyone else go silent again. Ryan clenched his fists, ready to argue, but something in her eyes stopped him. There was no arrogance there, only confidence and a kind of sadness that he couldn't understand. He turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. After that day, things changed around the camp. The jokes stopped completely. The recruits began to treat Emma differently. Some approached her for advice, asking how she stayed so composed during combat. Others simply gave her space, watching her with quiet respect. Miller, however, couldn't stop thinking about the fight. The speed, the precision, it reminded him of something he'd seen years ago, when he trained with a Special Forces operative. Those moves weren't taught in regular combat training. They were tactical maneuvers, quick, efficient, meant to disable without killing. That night, as he wrote his report, Miller found himself writing one sentence over and over again. "She's not what she seems." As for Emma, she didn't brag or talk about the fight. To her, it wasn't about winning. It was about control, discipline, and restraint, values she had learned long ago, in a world she no longer wanted to be part of. But no matter how much she tried to stay in the background, she knew one thing for sure. What happened today had changed everything. The team would never see her as just another recruit again. And though she hadn't meant to, Emma had just revealed the first real glimpse of the soldier she used to be. In the silence of the training room that night, Emma looked at her reflection in the mirror, her calm eyes, her steady hands, and whispered softly to herself, "Old habits never die." The atmosphere at Ironsight Security changed completely after the fight. The recruits no longer laughed at Emma Carter. They watched her carefully now, some with respect, others with fear. The story of how she defeated Ryan spread fast. Every time she walked into the training hall, conversations went quiet. People whispered about her behind her back, wondering who she really was and where she had learned to fight like that. But Ryan wasn't ready to let it go. His pride was shattered, and anger burned inside him. He couldn't stand that everyone now looked at Emma like she was some kind of legend. He wanted to expose her, to prove that she wasn't who they thought she was. So, one afternoon, when the recruits were resting after training, Ryan stood up in the middle of the group and said loudly, "You all think she's some kind of super soldier, huh? Let's see some proof." The room went silent. Emma was sitting alone at the edge of the room, cleaning her gloves. She looked up slowly, her face calm as always. "Proof of what?" she asked quietly. "Of whatever you are," Ryan snapped. "You fight like a professional. You move like a ghost. People say you were in some secret unit. If that's true, then show us. Otherwise, stop pretending." The other recruits shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to take sides, but curiosity filled the air. Miller, the instructor, was watching from across the room, his expression unreadable. He didn't stop them, he wanted to see how Emma would handle this. Emma looked at Ryan for a long moment, then sighed softly. "I don't owe you or anyone else proof," she said. "But maybe it's time you learned to be careful what you ask for." Ryan smirked. "So, that's it? Just words again." Emma stood up slowly. Her movements were graceful but deliberate. She unzipped her training jacket halfway, then turned around, pulling the fabric down just enough to reveal her upper back. The room fell completely silent. There, on her left shoulder blade, was a tattoo, small, black, and perfectly defined. It was a serpent coiled around a dagger, marked with a faint line of coordinates beneath it. The design was simple but powerful, unlike any common tattoo. Miller froze. His eyes widened as recognition hit him. He had seen that symbol once before, years ago, on a classified file from a mission that had been labeled Top Secret. It belonged to a covert group known as Unit Shadow 9, a black ops team so secret that even most of the military didn't know it existed. The serpent symbolized stealth and danger. The dagger represented precision and silence. Only members of that unit bore the mark, and only those who had survived. No one spoke for several seconds. The recruits stared, not sure if what they were seeing was real. Ryan's smirk faded. He took a small step back, his confidence crumbling. That doesn't mean anything," he said weakly. Miller stood up slowly. "It means everything," he said firmly. "That mark is real. I've seen it before. Only one unit ever used it." Ryan turned pale. "You can't be serious, sir." "You mean she's—" Miller nodded slowly. "Yes, if she carries that tattoo, then she's not just trained. She's one of the few who walked out alive from missions most people never even hear about." The room fell into a stunned silence. Emma zipped up her jacket again and turned to face them. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of old memories. "I didn't want anyone to know," she said softly. "That part of my life is over." Ryan looked down, unable to meet her eyes. He finally understood that all his arrogance, his teasing, his attempts to humiliate her, they had all been directed at someone who had faced real danger, someone who had risked her life countless times. He felt small, foolish, and deeply ashamed. One of the younger recruits broke the silence. "Ma'am, is it true? You were really in Black Ops?" Emma hesitated. "I can't talk about what I did," she said. "Most of it isn't supposed to exist. But yes, I was part of something different." Her voice was calm, but there was a shadow in her tone. A sadness that came from remembering things she had tried to forget. The others listened quietly. They could feel that her words carried truth. Miller finally spoke. "You didn't have to show them, Carter," he said gently. "I know," she replied. "But sometimes silence only invites more noise." The recruits said nothing. For the first time since she joined Ironsight, Emma felt the weight of their eyes not in judgment but in respect. They didn't see her as weak anymore. They saw her as something rare, a survivor. That night, the camp was unusually quiet. No laughter, no teasing. Everyone stayed in their bunks, thinking about what they had learned. Miller sat in his office, staring at his old military files, trying to recall the last report he'd seen about Shadow 9. It was a mission from years ago, one that went wrong. The file said the entire team was presumed dead, except for one unnamed operative who had never returned to active service. Now, sitting just a few rooms away, that operative was Emma Carter. Later, as the moonlight filtered through the training hall windows, Emma stood alone near the mat. She touched her shoulder lightly where the tattoo rested. It wasn't just ink. It was a memory, a scar that told the story of everything she had lost. She had joined Ironsight hoping to start over, to live quietly, away from the ghosts of her past. But the truth had a way of resurfacing. When she heard footsteps behind her, she didn't turn. It was Miller. "You know they'll never look at you the same now," he said softly. "I know," she replied. "But maybe that's not a bad thing." He nodded. "That mark. It's not something you forget." "I haven't," she whispered. "I just stopped talking about it." For a long moment they stood in silence. Then Miller said quietly, "Whatever you were before, Carter, you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Emma looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "I stopped carrying it a long time ago," she said. "Now I just wear it." And with that, she walked out into the cold night air. Quiet, steady, and stronger than ever. The others would never mock her again because now they understood. Behind her calm eyes was a story that none of them could imagine, and one tattoo that spoke louder than any words ever could. After that night, the entire atmosphere around Ironsight Security changed completely. Emma Carter was no longer the quiet, mysterious woman everyone laughed at. She had become something else entirely, a symbol of fear, respect, and curiosity. Every recruit looked at her differently now. Some admired her courage, others avoided her out of intimidation. But no one dared to question her again. Ryan, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. The image of that tattoo haunted him. He kept replaying it in his mind. The serpent coiled around the dagger, the way Miller's face had gone pale when he saw it, and the cold, steady calm in Emma's voice when she said, "That part of my life is over." He wanted to believe she was lying, that it was all a trick. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one could fight, move, or think the way she did unless they had been trained for something far darker than regular combat. The next morning, training began as usual, but there was an uneasy silence in the air. Even Miller, the instructor, seemed more careful with his words. He didn't push Emma or question her anymore. When she entered the hall, everyone stood straighter, subconsciously showing her respect. During a short break, one of the new recruits named Sarah gathered the courage to approach Emma. "Ma'am," she said softly, "is it true that the tattoo means you were part of Black Ops?" Emma paused for a moment before answering. "Something like that," she said quietly. "But don't let that fool you. It's not something to be proud of." Sarah frowned, confused. "But everyone's saying you were a hero." Emma gave a small, sad smile. "Heroes don't exist where I came from. Only survivors." Her words carried a heavy truth that silenced Sarah instantly. Emma could see the girl wanted to ask more, but she didn't. She just nodded and walked away, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. Later that day, Miller called Emma to his office. When she entered, she noticed a file open on his desk, an old, worn folder with faded writing. He looked up at her with serious eyes. "I made a few calls," he said quietly. "I wanted to be sure." Emma stayed silent. Miller continued, "That tattoo, I was right. It's from Unit Shadow 9. The file said the team was wiped out in an operation 6 years ago. Everyone was listed as Kia. But there's one name on record classified, no rank, no photo, just initials. EC. Emma exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't have looked that up." "I had to," Miller replied. "If you're really from that unit, you shouldn't even be here. That means the government still thinks you're dead." She gave a faint, humorless smile. "That's the idea." Miller leaned back in his chair. "You're hiding from them?" "I'm done with that life," she said quietly. "I walked away from it. I had to." He studied her for a moment. "Why?" For a while, Emma didn't answer. Her eyes grew distant, lost somewhere far beyond the room. "Because I lost everything," she finally said. "My team, my family, even myself. I watched good people die because of bad orders. I couldn't do it anymore, so I disappeared. I thought if I came here, just as another recruit, I could start over." Miller nodded slowly, understanding. "And now your secret's out." Emma's jaw tightened. "Yes, and secrets like mine don't stay quiet for long. That evening, Ryan found himself standing outside, watching Emma from a distance as she trained alone. She moved like a shadow, every step smooth, precise, controlled. He felt guilty. He had been the one to push her, to humiliate her, to demand proof. And because of that, she had been forced to reveal something she clearly didn't want to share. He walked up to her slowly. "Carter," he said. She stopped mid-motion, her back still to him. "I wanted to say, I was wrong. About everything. I didn't know." Emma turned around, her expression calm. "You don't have to apologize," she said. "You asked for proof. I gave it. But I embarrassed you in front of everyone," he said quietly. "I acted like a fool." She looked at him for a moment before replying, "You weren't the first. You just didn't know what you were dealing with." He nodded, ashamed. "Still, I'm sorry. And thank you for not breaking my arm that day." A small smile flickered on her lips. "You're learning." Ryan chuckled nervously. "So, are you really part of that secret unit?" Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at the sky, the sunset painting the clouds in orange and red. "Let's just say," she said softly, "I've seen things that most people shouldn't." He nodded slowly, understanding that was all she would ever say. "If you ever need help," he began, but she interrupted him gently. "I won't," she said. "But thank you." The next few days passed quietly. But one evening, a black SUV drove into the training compound. It wasn't scheduled, and no one knew who it belonged to. Two men in dark suits stepped out, both carrying badges that looked official but unfamiliar. They spoke to the guards, then asked for Miller. Emma saw them from a distance, and her stomach dropped. She knew that look, that kind of presence. They weren't company officials, they were government agents. And if they were here, it meant her past had caught up with her. Miller met them near his office, but Emma could see the tension in his body language. The agents handed him a folder, spoke quietly, and pointed toward her. Miller's expression hardened. When they left, he turned and met Emma's eyes across the yard. It was clear. They had come for her. That night, she sat alone in her cabin, the lights off, thinking about what to do. She had tried so hard to build a normal life, but the past never truly let go. The tattoo she had revealed to silence her doubters had become a beacon, one that led her enemies right to her. She looked at the duffel bag under her bed, the one she hadn't opened in years. Inside were things from her old life, documents, photos, a weapon, and a necklace belonging to her fallen teammate. As she held it, a single tear slid down her cheek. She whispered softly to herself, "I should have known this day would come." And outside, under the dim light of the moon, two figures in dark suits waited by their car, watching her cabin, waiting for the order to move. Emma Carter wasn't running anymore, but the ghosts she tried to bury were on their way back, and this time, there would be no hiding. That night was colder than usual at the Ironsight compound. The wind moved through the trees in soft whispers, and the sky was heavy with clouds that hid the stars. Inside her cabin, Emma Carter sat in silence, staring at the small duffel bag on her bed. It was the same bag she had promised herself never to open again. But now, with two government agents waiting outside, she knew the time for silence was over. She slowly unzipped it, revealing her past piece by piece. A folded black uniform, a metal ID tag with no name, just a number, and a small dagger with the same serpent symbol as her tattoo. The moment her fingers touched it, memories came flooding back. The missions, the gunfire, the radio voices, the feeling of loss when her team never came back. She had buried that part of her life 6 years ago, but now it stood before her again, alive and breathing. A knock echoed on her cabin door. 3 slow knocks. She knew that pattern, it was a military code. She didn't move at first. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Come in." The door opened, and Miller stepped inside, his face serious. He closed the door behind him quietly. "They're here for you," he said softly. "I know," she replied. "They showed me your file," he continued. "They didn't say much, but they called you Echo 9. That's you, isn't it? Emma didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, That's a name from a long time ago. It doesn't belong to me anymore. Miller sighed. They want to take you back. Or at least talk to you. Emma laughed bitterly. Talk? That's not how they work. If they came here, it means something's gone wrong. And they need someone who knows how to clean up the mess. Miller looked at her carefully. Then what are you going to do? She stood up slowly and zipped the bag shut. I'm going to find out why they came. And if they're bringing trouble here, I'll end it before it starts. When she stepped outside, the air felt heavy. The two men in suits were still standing near their vehicle, talking quietly. When they saw her approach, they straightened immediately. One of them, tall and sharp-faced, stepped forward. Emma Carter? That depends on who's asking, she replied calmly. He held up his ID. Agent Dawson, National Security Division. We need to speak with you about Operation Spectre. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That operation doesn't exist, she said flatly. He nodded. Exactly. But someone's trying to make it exist again. Miller stepped closer, frowning. What's this about? The second agent spoke this time. 3 weeks ago, a data breach exposed files about Shadow 9. Information that should have stayed buried. Someone's been leaking classified names and mission records. We tracked the trail to this compound. Emma's body tensed. You think I leaked it? Agent Dawson shook his head. No. We think someone's after you. The people who did this know you survived. And they're coming. Miller's eyes widened. Coming here? Yes, Dawson said. They know where she is now. You don't have much time. Emma stayed silent for a moment. Then she asked, How long? Maybe a few hours, Dawson replied. You should come with us. We can protect you. Emma looked down, thinking. No, she said firmly. Running won't stop them. They'll keep coming until I face them. Dawson frowned. You don't understand what you're up against. She met his gaze coldly. No, Agent. You don't understand what they're up against. Without waiting for another word, she turned and walked back to her cabin. Miller followed her, his face full of concern. Emma, this isn't just another mission, he said. I know, she replied quietly. It's unfinished business. Inside the cabin, she opened a small metal box and pulled out an earpiece and a folded piece of paper with coordinates written on it. Her team's last known location from 6 years ago. She had kept it hidden all this time, a reminder of the lives she couldn't save. Miller watched her prepare in silence. You're really going to fight them? He asked. She nodded. Not because I want to, but because I have to. If they find me here, they'll hurt everyone. I won't let that happen. He stepped closer. Then I'm helping you. Emma looked at him for a long moment. You don't owe me that, Miller. Maybe not, he said. But I owe it to every recruit here. And after what I've seen you do, I'm not letting you face this alone. A faint smile crossed her lips. Then get ready. They won't wait until morning. Hours passed in tense silence. The compound was dark and still. The recruits had been moved to safety, but Emma and Miller stayed behind, hidden in the shadows near the training field. The only sound was the rustling of trees. Then headlights appeared in the distance. 3 black vehicles rolled in silently, no license plates, no markings. They're here, Emma whispered. Armed men stepped out, dressed in black gear with masks covering their faces. Their movements were sharp and professional. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Emma's eyes narrowed. She recognized their formation. It was the same kind her unit used. Whoever was coming for her knew exactly how she operated. The first shot came fast. A flash of light, a sharp crack, and a bullet hit the wall beside her. She and Miller ducked behind cover. They're surrounding us, he shouted. Emma took a deep breath, her training kicking in. She moved like lightning, rolling out, firing 2 precise shots that hit their targets before they could react. Every move was clean, efficient, almost too perfect, like she had never left the field. The fight lasted only a few minutes but felt like an eternity. By the time the last attacker fell, the field was silent again, the air thick with smoke and tension. Miller stood, breathing hard. Who were they? he asked. Emma looked at one of the fallen men and pulled off his mask. Her eyes darkened when she saw the tattoo on his neck, a serpent wrapped around a dagger, the same as hers. She whispered, almost to herself, "They were Shadow 9. Miller frowned. "But I thought your team was dead." "So did I," she said quietly. "But someone rebuilt it." She looked up at the sky, her eyes cold and distant. "The past doesn't die, Miller. It just waits for the right time to strike." As the sirens of approaching vehicles echoed in the distance, Emma picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and said, "It's time to finish what they started." Miller called after her, "Where are you going?" She turned back, her voice calm but firm. "To end this for good." Then she walked into the night, her silhouette fading into the darkness, leaving behind the compound, the fear, and the only peace she had ever known. Emma Carter was no longer hiding. The soldier she once was, the ghost of Shadow 9, had awakened again.